Hey minions, welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price.
And I'm Eric.
And this is part 2 of our March Smashness coverage for revealing the seeds. You will have already seen the seeds for 32 through 25. Today we're going to be showing you 24 through 17. So when you're viewing these from a top-down perspective, these are ones that are not the worst. They're good, but they're not quite in the upper half just yet. So everything that we said from the previous video still applies. We're just going to jump right into number 24.
Number 24, Ancient Egyptians Luchadors. This was Touring Jedi's bottom ranked. Consistently, I see a lot of upper ranked ones, 28, 29, another 28. Originally seed, they were at 26. So there was a few high votes that kind of pushed them down to the 24 seed.
And there's reasons for that. As I explained in the video for this team, they were a late change to where I got gun shy about 2 of the teams and I swapped them internally. And because of that, I didn't have as much experience with them, and no one really had a chance to play them beforehand. A lot of these teams had already been played well before the teams were decided, and I just never had time to actually play them. And I unfortunately picked my seeds before I played them, and it's like they're not 28. And I made Turing Jedi play them. And I said, are they 32? And he said, no, they are not. So I feel like this is something that people would not have thought to pair, particularly because I didn't think to pair them because I didn't do it initially. And it's something that could be played incorrectly. I did factor that in my original seeding, is that they have very high upside, but how is it to realize that upside, and would people play them accordingly?
And that's another good question. Player experience with these factions, since they're part of the newer expansions, people aren't as used to them as well as they are with some of the older ones, like say the originals.
Right. And
so experience of playing it is a factor when considering how good these teams could do during the tournament.
Yeah, a lot of them are based on things that have been around, and I think it's less likely that people would pair newer factions together. I mean, both of these came out in the last year and a half. I know that when we're playtesting, we don't really combine, like, we just went through 50 games of like the World Tour Part 1. We're not going to mix them very much with World Tour Part 2 because like we need a break. And I think that's what happened with these guys, is that it tends to be like old, new, old, new. There's not a lot of new. They might be the only team. I'd have to check. I don't know this off the top of my head, but they might actually be the 2 newest teams to actually get combined. Most of them is a mix of old and new. But they are crazy. I called them my dark horse candidate to win. I'm not paying too much attention to who they're facing right now, but just from the number of things that they can do, it's crazy. There were plenty of times when I was playing against them that I knew I could break a base, but I knew I would not win. And so I had to wait to figure out, like, if I want to win this base, how am I going to do it? And then I ultimately decided, you know what? I don't want to win this base. And then I completely went a different direction. They're tough. I'd call dibs on them because I want to play them. I don't know. They're hard to play. Burying is hard. You have to think several turns in advance. Luchadors aren't the easiest anyway. But I'm really excited for them. I hate that they were higher than 26. No, I'm saying that they were seeded at 26. They went higher than 24 before ultimately getting knocked back down. I think it's fair to put them there just because they do have to have the upside realized. And burying can backfire at times, but I can't say enough good things about this combination. I really love them.
All right, there you go. Jim's dark horse. Number 23, Bearcar Sumo Wrestlers. Would not want to get in a tussle with these guys. They have, some indestructibility. They can move around. They have some draw play abilities.
Yeah. And you'll see that they were originally seeded 15, but they're being marked at 23. Why is that? Well, I felt like the 15 is high. Yes, they can absolutely disrupt many teams. They've got 2 8s. They've got a 9. And then a number of them around the 16 mark. So it makes sense that mathematically they'd be at 15. But There's the do nothing and then explode strategy, which this team completely falls, susceptible to, and they have power creep written all over them because their job is to add more power over time. So it's like pass, and there's a number of teams that it's like, okay, my turn, I beat you. Like, thanks for making it more efficient.
Yeah.
So it can go either way. I just felt against these particular teams, there were other teams that I had to move up. Someone had to move down. And they kept sliding after that. Many people might disagree with that, but really, the do nothing and then explode strategy, it's a very underrated tactic.
Number 22, Grannies Mythic Greeks. This was Chedorific's lowest ranking. It had only one single digit, 8 for Vespert. You put it at 16. So what are your thoughts on why you ranked it so much better than where it actually ended up?
When we talk about floors and ceilings, they have a relatively lower ceiling, but they have a higher floor. So if you think that like a faction can slide in between here and here, anything can go wrong. Mythic Greek Grannies are about here. It's really hard to play them poorly. No, I take that back. It is easy to play them poorly if you choose to do so. It is very hard to draw them poorly because Mythic Greeks don't have a lot of bad cards. Like I like all the cards. I think they're too strong. The Grannies help you find them. I think the Grannies are very bad, and I know that Chedorific agrees on that. And Chucky's Cookie also agrees, but he marked them as 13. He hates the Grannies, but marked them at 13 because they make them very consistent. You can get to what you want quickly, and the Grannies have underestimated card draw. That was my mistake. I lost against them twice in March Smashness before ultimately beating them in the finals, and it was their card draw with the aliens that made them
so potent.
So potent. The difference is the aliens can't break bases. Yeah. These guys can. They also have great recursion. You have the Greeks who can recur cards and the Grannies who can recur the cards, which means that if one of the cards you recur is the recurrence cards, then you just keep playing your best minions over and over again. And in the case of Greeks, those best minions are pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
And the Grannies have a number of action play. Like, it's possible to play Favor of Dionysius like 5 or 6 times in a turn. And it's annoying that you have to sit there and math it out. Like, there'll be some editing that needs to be done. Like, where if you look at the time sync, it's like 5 minutes later.
Yeah.
Yeah, now I'll take my turn. But they're very consistent. And I'm okay with them being at 22. That actually it's funny because they moved up and then moved back down to 22. But it's not that far off from where I thought they would be. And I think their consistency is really good. And they've got a pretty good tool set. The only thing they can't do is mess with you, which could be a disadvantage. But they're so busy doing their own thing that they can just break a base instantly.
Number 21, Mad Scientist's Kitty Cats. That's a lot of controllability with some indestructibility.
Yeah. Now, you'll notice that this has 232 votes.
Right. That's probably the only one that has it, right?
I think they might be the only one.
Yeah. I think the only one with 2 bottom ranks by Blackjack and Blabley. But you and Sonus also marked it at 17 equally. So what are you and what thoughts that you got from him that why y'all marked it at 17?
So you'll notice that they were originally marked at 27 and that they were moved to 21. Now, these guys moved a lot, and a large part had to do with it is that I have played this team extensively. They can be absolutely crazy. Yes, there is one way to draw their cards that's absolutely terrible. And unfortunately, I did get that draw in an exhibition game, but they still won because of Mushroom Kingdom. But their upside is crazy because they can break 3 bases in a turn and it can come out of nowhere. They do require a lot on minion presence, but they can mess with you in so many ways until then. they can hoard cards and then jump on for second place. So this is an example where my experience with them kind of trumped, theoretical things from other teams. I know that not a lot of people have played them. I marked them as one of the most surprising ones when I did their video. There was also a late night campaign last night where I gave some people a chance to convince me to move up one. And these guys jumped a bunch of spots because of that campaign. Another team that we'll talk about in a second was the beneficiary of that. But it's like, if people feel really strongly, one of the things that we do in data mining is outlier forgiveness. And the way that I interpret that is, you've got 232 votes. Let's forgive half of those points. So if, let's say, there were 216s instead of 232s, where would they end up as a result? And this is much more in line with where they would be. So if you took out the outliers and just assume that, they got an average vote, all of a sudden their numbers don't look that bad.
Number 20, Dragons Tricksters. Again, they have some victory base point manipulation for victory points. And then they can, of course, with the Tricksters, really mess with your opponent. Which can really be problematic if you, say, lose your alpha or lose some other element that's critical to your strategy.
Yeah. I don't understand why everybody hates these guys together, but I accept it. Like, I mark them as 11. I ask people, like, why? Why don't they? Like, they can struggle to break bases. It's like, they don't necessarily need to. They just need to they need to bleed you of cards. They need to make you miserable. They can steal. In one of their exhibition games, someone broke a base that had runes on it, thinking that they were going to get, it was a 4-2-1 base. They thought that they were going to get 3 points and I get 2. No, I stole that base. I got 4 and they got 0 because I jumped on the Great Worm at the last second. At one point, I had them down to 1 card.
Yeah.
They're powerful. They are. They can be countered like everyone else. They have some absolutely hysterical counters. I still really like them. I feel like they're getting shortchanged, but I couldn't justify trying to bring them up. And so they actually landed exactly where people wanted them to be based on the average. So I'm a little sour about it, but that's why we play the games, because, maybe, I'm not looking too far ahead to see who they're playing against. I don't want that to influence or make me say the wrong thing. But I think they'll surprise people. And if not, at least they'll go down in a blaze of glory.
All right, number 19, Pacific Voyagers Explorers. Now, this is one of the factions where I'm always saying bases matter. For this faction, bases are super important. Not only can there be a ton of bases out there, but they can control which ones are out there. Right. So I know basically your kryptonite is there being 5 or 10 different bases out there. There's one time we were playtesting on your table with this faction, and there was so many bases on there that we just had them in a stack, and not on a stack on top of each other, but so many that I just jumped on a base and I'm like, oh, I broke that base by myself. Well, we all forgot that base even existed.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to bring up, I am still very bitter about that game, because my little reaction was like, wait, that base is in play? That's not the discard pile? That is exactly what happened. And it's like, logistically, it's a nightmare. Now, we'll talk about the faction strength, but there's an important note about this. Most of the games that we record will be recorded digitally.
Yes.
There is no way to do that in a way that makes sense. So their matchups will be the only ones that are recorded
in person, live with us, with the old style where we had the tray, the cards, and all that stuff.
Now, that could create a logistical issue because we have international players, and we'll talk more in a future video about how we want the winners to advance. But it is theoretically possible that we may have to finagle some things as far as recording those games, just because the players of those games might not live in this country. So we're going to ask for a little bit of patience with them. As far as the actual team, they're strong. I had them at 14. Some people didn't necessarily like them, but the funny thing about this is that I've read a lot of commentary about people not liking these two teams together. They thought that they would work, and it was like mind-boggling why that people thought that, because they're perfectly equipped. You have a faction who wants singular minions on bases with the Polynesian Voyagers, with a faction that can start putting minions on every base. And it's not just when, I want to clarify something, because a lot of people thought that it didn't work this way. The Crypt Looter is based on when a base comes into play, not after a base scores. Those are two different things. There aren't a lot of abilities that bring bases into play unless you're playing Polynesian Voyagers. So Maui bringing in two bases all of a sudden makes sense, because that could be two Crypt Looters. And then with Unity of the Tribes, that's an additional +4 power plus Maui's power. And you still have all those minions out for the mass movement of the explorers that they have. They are very difficult to play against because of the number of bases. I'm going to ask whoever plays them not to get excessive, but they have to win the games.
Right, they gotta use their strategy, and sometimes flooding the area with bases is a strategy that you need to use, because you need to use one base's ability to break a base in another base, like Storyteller's Hut.
Yeah, there's actually been a number of times where we've played Polynesian Voyagers where Storyteller's Hut comes into play out of nowhere, and then that extra action is critical. That's in that deck. Storyteller's Hut is in that deck. You have to know the base deck, because normally it's like, well, there's 32 bases. I'm only going to see 8 of them. It's like, you're not going to see 8 bases. You may see 8 bases at one time. And the explorers can also hunt for the specific bases that they want. So when you're considering matchups, make sure you look at the base deck. And I'll have more about that to say that. And there's going to be a bases video at the end of the month that I'm really excited about. Bases that are most likely to throw a wrench in your plans. And that's really interesting.
Number 18, Time Travelers Vikings. The ability to raid and time loop and jump and do all that fun stuff sounds pretty effective. But you marked them down as 30, and they're already down here at 18. They have a pretty high deviation at 81. Well, that's not high, that's about average, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting that it's not higher.
Yeah.
Right. It's because remember, the deviation is based off the original seed. It's interesting that it's not higher because they moved up a lot. Obviously, they were at 28. They jumped 10 spots to 18. I admit that I do not know how to seed these guys, because you're basically playing 4 factions. There are teams that they will be useless against. It's like, take my ghost card. You can't play it anyway. But they could be very oppressive. And this is one that when we really talked about it as a panel, everyone's like, you're crazy. Like, yes, you can't predict who they're going to face, but just when you actually started looking at it. So I give credit to Sonus and Cheddarific, who would just not let this team go. And it's like, when you really start thinking about the damage that they could do to particular teams, it was significant. And that's why between their exhibition results and the actual looking at it on paper, who they could face against, they deserved. I actually wanted to move them higher than 18, just because they're complete wild card. It's just I couldn't find a spot for them, because I still have to do justice to the teams that are naturally strong.
All right, number 17, Wizards Miskatonic University, or as I call it, Hogwarts. They are ranked number 32 by Mr. D-Rock. There's a 31, yeah, a couple 31s, but they made it all the way here to 17.
So this is the other late night campaign, which actually was a tag team effort from Blackjack and Chucky. So I like these guys a lot. I did not want to put them at 25. They just fell to 25. It was just that I kept liking people more and more, but it's like I felt like I was shortchanging them. these guys can be crazy. They can be played incorrectly, but they can be absolutely crazy. And they just burn through their cards so quickly that it doesn't matter what they play. It doesn't matter if they overpay on a base. They're going to get those cards back. In one game, they got through their deck twice before someone else did once. And they were at like the 2.5 mark.
Wow.
Yeah. They just draw so many cards, play so many cards. You can counter them. When I talk about the giant ants, winning, it's like the score was not good. Like if I don't do the thing with giant ants, that game's an absolute blowout. Like historically bad. Like that's just the homeworld. They just broke it out of nowhere. On Innsmouth, they broke that. I let them have that base because it's like I don't care that those points don't matter to me. This is a team that unless you play them, you're probably not going to be a believer. Once you see them in action against a lot of teams, you'll see their potential. But you do have to watch how much madness you have. They have lost games on madness ties, unfortunately. But that just shows you that they're right up there the entire time. Even when they've lost, they've been extremely competitive, and that makes them scary, which is why they jumped up as much as they did.
All right. Well, that breaks down our upper lower half bracket.
Yeah. So the next few videos will show the teams that are in the upper half, the ones that will be the favorites at least in the round 1 matches, and I'm really excited to talk about those.
All right, let's
shut it down.